As direct descendants of the family still live on the estate, I will not reveal its name. But not so very long ago, the land surrounding the great house reached right down to the brooding and opaque waters of the River Parrett. The house, being on the rise, had always escaped the worst of the flooding, and a magnificent avenue of 200 ancient oak trees had kept the soil in place, with the roots so deep they too had managed to withstand the strength of the floods. The old lord had been respected and well liked in his time, mainly because he had kept himself to himself and never interfered. If he ever had been outspoken enough to profess a motto, it would have been something like, "Live and let live," or "Let's not be too hasty." When his beloved wife died in childbirth, leaving him only a son, the lord became even more retiring. So whilst he was alive, everything trundled on pretty much as it always had done. However, when he died and his son inherited the estate, things changed overnight. The young lord couldn't lay eyes upon anything without wanting to change it, and without demanding instant results. He showed no respect for the weather, seasons, traditions, or the laws of nature. The head gardener was summoned and instructed to hire extra men to chop down those old-fashioned oak trees whose leaves made such a mess in the autumn. The gardener's disapproving mutterings were like distant rumblings of thunder threatening an approaching storm. In 3 months, the trees that had taken 300 years to grow were no more, and where their mighty network of roots had been, now lay craters of gaping earth. This gave the new lord another idea. Not only must the craters be filled in, but all the sloping lawns and water meadows to the riverbank must be levelled. This latest order drew outspoken protest from the head gardener and all the other servants. "But sir, what of the floods come the autumn? That slope is the only thing between you and they, and now with the girt trees gone, the waters will lie deeper and longer on the land." The young lord would not see reason, and the enormous task of levelling the ground began. Not a hole could be filled without the young lord placing a billiard ball on the raw earth to see whether it rolled in any direction. Eventually, the vast, featureless expanse was planted with grass seed. The new grass sprang up, and one morning the young lord looked out the window of the great house, and all he could see was a flat green world in which it seemed every blade of grass was pointing in the same direction. Had it not been for a few fluffy white clouds making the sky look untidy, all would have been perfect. Earthly perfection lasted for the rest of that day, until he decided that the meanders of the river were rather an untidy shape, with their curling and wriggling like some giant worm. All would look far neater if the course of the river was changed into a nice straight line. Eventually this too was done, and the grass was replanted when the ground had passed the billiard ball test. Then the land was finally as smooth and unadorned as a billiard table should be, with the line of the river providing the straight edge that any table requires. Had it not been for the breeze blowing unsightly ripples on the river's surface, all would have been perfect. Earthly perfection lasted until the next morning, when the lord was horrified to see random dirty brown heaps dotted about his perfect lawn. The head gardener was summoned, and an explanation demanded. Barely able to speak past his huge grin, the gardener said, "Sir, they Moby warts is come." This was the country name for moles, and though the young lord hadn't given a passing thought to the humble mole before, he could certainly see the damage they did to his smooth perfection. When his fit of rage finally allowed him to speak, he gave the orders for the gardener to have the creatures destroyed. "Sir, you haven't asked for my advice, and I'm not giving you any. What I am giving you is a warning. Do not have me destroy they Moby warps. I've kept up with all this here nonsense this far, though it's gone against my conscience, but now my conscience is bidding me to give you fair warning that if you persist in this, great harm will befall. Even if I am the first gardener on God's earth to speak up for those little varmints." Reason and sensitivity were not the young lord's strong points. He gave the order again, this time with threats, and the mole cull was on. So many moles were killed that soon the gardener added a moleskin wardrobe of trousers, garters, gloves, jackets, hats, slippers to his traditional moleskin waistcoat. His wife had moleskin caps and aprons, and a moleskin duster brought the shine on her windows up a treat. Still the moles kept coming. And soon hers was not the only baby on the estate to rejoice in the comfort of moleskin nappies. Then, just as the ladies of the congregation were debating whether to provide the parish church with a moleskin altar cloth, it seemed that the moles were no more. The next morning, the young lord looked out over his desecrated lawn and saw that, although it was matted with flattened brown patches, no new crumbling heaps had appeared. With relief, he ordered the bare patches to be resown with grass seed, and within a few weeks his dream of perfection was restored. Apart from an untidy flock of birds shifting about the lawn in search of worms in this mole-free expanse. Perfection lasted until the next day, when huge heaps of shovelled earth appeared, each about 20 times the size of the previous ones. Foaming with fury, the young lord sent for the head gardener. "'Tis the King of the Moby Warps, King of the Moles to you, sir, who has heard his people are in distress and has come here to see what he can do." "Well, get rid of him, and be quick about it." "That, sir, is beyond my wit and skill. There's only one man on God's earth fit to catch the King of the Moles, and that man is Mickey the Mole himself." "Then fetch him here immediately." "There's no fetching Mickey the Mole, sir, because he is one of the travelling people, and he do go where he do go. Perhaps by chance he may come in the autumn, when the weather closes in." And so that was that, and the young lord watched helplessly, as day by day the King of the Mole's revenge changed his beautiful meadow into something resembling a lunar landscape. At last, with summer's end, the travelling people returned to their winter camp. The young lord was disconcerted one evening to have his study door flung open without the benefit of an announcement from his butler. There stood Mickey the Mole, his long, prehensile nose whiffling the unaccustomed air of the indoors, and his huge hands dangling like a pair of shovels. "I hears you wants to see me," he said, without looking once at his future employer. "Here you are at last. You are to get rid of the King of the Moles for me." "You gets nothing for nothing. What's in it for me?" "A bag of gold if you capture the beast and show him to me." "Show me the size of the bag, and if it be girt enough to fit the creature in, it's a bargain." At last, Mickey the Mole was satisfied with a bag as big as 4 potato sacks, and he spat on the palm of his hand, which the young lord was obliged to shake to seal the deal. Not long after, the young lord was sitting in his study with his curtains drawn against the woeful sight of his destroyed grounds, when he heard the horrendous heaving and scraping, and then the door was kicked open. There was Mickey the Mole dragging a cage. In it was a mole the size of a calf. His huge paws had bent the bars, and his claws had ground ruts through the parquet flooring. A hiss of rage squeezed its way through the rows of jagged teeth as he caught the scent of his enemy. As for the young lord, he would have thought himself dreaming and in the grip of some monster-filled nightmare if he had not seen the golden crown upon the animal's head, proving that he was truly in the presence of the Mole King. "And now I want you to take him away and kill him." So saying, he produced a bag of gold, which was placed on top of the cage. Just as Mickey the Mole was dragging the cage away, the young lord called him back. "And I don't want you to give him an easy, clean death. I want you to kill him the slowest, most painful way possible, and come back tomorrow and tell me how he died." The torturer leered and dragged the scrambling creature away. Next day, he was back. "I thought long and hard about the worst death I could muster," he said, "and it were no easy task to make up my mind. I thought to take him where the river waxes tidal and leave him in his cage in the shallows, drowning slowly as the tide rises. But then I thought that would be too clean a death for him. I thought to set him in a ring of fire and build the fire up slowly, so he died burnt to death, tormented by the smell of his own scorched whiskers. But I thought that would have been too warm and cosy a death for him. I thought of dropping him from one of the great cliffs of Cheddar Gorge, but that would have been too quick a death for him. By all the elements, I was considering the best way for him to die." "Yes, yes," cried the ever-hasty lord, salivating at the horrific possibilities. "And which did you choose?" "Having considered war, fire, and ere I decided on the worst possible death. And so I buried him alive." The young lord let out a great sigh of satisfaction. In a fit of unaccustomed generosity, gave the torturer an extra bag of gold. So yet again, once the grass seed had sprouted, earthly perfection reigned for but a day, because on the morrow came a truly rainy day, followed by another and another. The rainy days were without number. Gone were the mature oak trees, the meanders and the slopes which were to channel the floodwaters away from the house. The head gardener watched furniture and carpets being washed away, and then the ancestral portraits and chandeliers. He watched and he waited, and it was not until the young lord was clinging to the roof of the great house that the gardener appeared on his coracle boat to lift him off. "I was thinking, like, sir, that if someone had not ordered they Moby Wart tunnels to be filled in, there would have been a pipe system like to take all this nasty water downstream." On many a moonlit night, the head gardener would row upstream to Boroughbridge Mump, known locally as the King of the Mole's castle. There he would set his ear to the hollow hill and listen to the scrabbling of huge claws and Mickey the Mole's harsh chuckle. Then he would hear the clink-clink of gold as two friends counted their well-earned treasure. The end.